As it started, who and what was the Grateful Dead?
That's a big question. You know, it started for me on a New Year's Eve between 1963 and 64. I was wandering the back streets of Palo Alto with a couple of friends, and we heard banjo music coming out from behind the music store that we used to frequent. We were folkies at the time. I had just turned 16, and we just knocked on the door, and Jerry came in. We knew it was Jerry. Everybody knew that he was the banjo teacher there.
Jerry Garcia.
Yeah, Jerry Garcia, and guitar teacher as well. And we just sort of invited ourselves in. He asked us if we played instruments, and we, sure. Well, I got the keys to the front. Let's go break out some instruments and kick some stuff around. And we did, and we had that evening so much fun that we decided we couldn't just walk away from it. Might as well just make a little band out of it, which we did. It was a jug band. Jug band music was popular back then. This is what Jerry used to call the folk scare days. And jug band music was, it happened on all the riverboat stops from New Orleans up to, say, Cincinnati. And, you know, Memphis, St. Louis, all along the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. And the jug band musicians were the same musicians that were the minstrel musicians on the riverboats. And it was the same music and stuff like that. But when they were on dry land, it was a little more, you know, they played in the dark towns on the street corners. And it was a little more bluesy. A little less showmanship, a little less shtick, if you will.
But you know about an old-fashioned jug band now, one that, say, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn would have recognized in their time.
Yeah, that's the music we were playing. And that music went on to become what we call funk music now. Funk music comes from all the same places, all the same cities. Big hotbed of funk music in Cincinnati, for instance. But you get it in New Orleans, you get it in Memphis, you get it in St. Louis. And it's the same scales, same rhythms, basically. The biggest difference is electric instruments and the hi-hat cymbal.
So you start this jug band with Jerry Garcia after the fortuitous New Year's Eve meeting. What was that band called originally?
It was called, the band was called Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions. It took us a little while to paste all that together. And we did well. We did well for, a year or so. At the age of 16, I was making pretty good money for a 16-year-old. There was a little tension at home because I maybe have been somewhat neglecting my studies and stuff like that. And I grew up under the shadow of Hoover Tower. My folks had Stanford in mind for me, not an itinerant troubadour. But my folks could clearly see that I was really following my bliss. Yeah. And they were, you know, I was sort of headstrong, and so, you know, experience had taught them that they would want to be delicate about trying to shift my course. Right. And they never really did manage to shift my course. You know, I was off into music. So anyway, the jug band did well for about a year. And toward the end of that year, the Beatles had been, they came out right about the time, they hit the airwaves in America right about the time that we were being successful as a jug band. And by the end of that year, I was working in the music store. I had taken Jerry's beginning and intermediate students and was teaching guitar and banjo in there. But the electric instruments were starting to give us the old come hither. And it just looked like too much fun to ignore.
You were looking at the Beatles and listening and saying, we can do that.
Yeah, we were thinking these guys are awful good, but they also look like they're having an awful lot of fun. You know, we can get good, and we know how to have fun. So let's go for it. And we did.
And that's when the Grateful Dead were born.
Yeah.
So that's what the Grateful Dead was in the beginning. And what did the Grateful Dead become?
We were eclectic. We were real serious about music. Real engaged in music. Any music that we could find that we could understand and find intriguing. But it was, the focus was music, not fashion, for instance, because in popular music there's an overlay of music as fashion, and we more or less rejected that. For instance, we were one of the first outfits that went sort of towards our country roots, because Jerry and I had grown up listening to country music on the radio. It was part of the, if you didn't like what was on the radio, you'd push a button, and there were all kinds of stations in the Bay Area, particularly. We had R&B stations, we had classical stations, we had jazz stations, and we'd listen to all of it. And so country music was part of that swamp that we grew out of. It was just too much fun to sing those songs, and too fulfilling to sing those songs. And so we figured, okay, well, we'll just have to work these up and present them with some amount of authority, so that the rock audiences of that day would find it palatable and let us get away with it.
Well, they certainly found it palatable and let you get away with it, to say the least. So the Grateful Dead becomes a very popular band, concert band, but you weren't concentrating on recording. I mean, you didn't hear the Grateful Dead all that much on radio.
We were real good at relating to a live audience, and that wasn't there in the studio. And it was hard for us to find a point of focus in the studio, playing for a machine, playing for a board like this. We never got all that good at it. We made a couple of pretty good records, or a few good records, actually. But what we did was, what we were good at was stating a theme, then taking it for a little walk in the woods.
Before a live audience.
For a live audience.
Right.
That we could bring along, because their energy, their appreciation, which you can feel on the moment, it energized us, it energized the music.